welcome back to Horror Galaxy. Tonight, I have 3 scary road trip horror stories for you. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed, because once you step onto the Horror Galaxy, you don't walk alone. I am slamming the fuel cap shut when I notice the numbers on the pump still rolling, clicking upward even though the nozzle is back in its cradle. My hand frozen there while the sound keeps going, a dry mechanical ticking that crawls up my spine. I look around, expecting someone to shout at me for breaking something, but the station is quiet in a way that feels deliberate, like it is holding its breath. I tell myself to calm down, that machine's glitch, that I am tired, that I have been driving too long with too much weight behind me, and I force myself back into the cab. The engine turns over without complaint, but the fuel gauge drops the moment the headlights swing back onto the road. It does not dip the way it normally does, slow and reasonable. It slides, smooth and steady, like water draining from a sink. I mutter something sharp and lean forward, tapping the dash as if that might make it behave. I tell myself the gauge is faulty, that the jolt from the dirt turnout probably knocked something loose. Still, I glance in the mirror, half expecting to see fuel spilling behind me. And the road is clean. I have been hauling gold concentrate out of Kalgoorlie for years, long enough to know every real stop, every place that matters. This one had not been on my route plan. I had only pulled in because the light came on sooner than expected, and the station lights were there, sudden and bright against nothing. Now, rolling away from it, I try to picture it again and realize I cannot remember its sign. I can remember the pumps, the square building, the way the air felt wrong when I stepped out, but not the name. That bothers me more than the gauge. I reach for the receipt on the passenger seat, planning to check the amount and maybe laugh about it later. The paper feels warm, like it has just come off a printer, and when I glance down, my chest tightens. The date printed at the top is wrong. Not a little wrong. It is decades ahead of where it should be. I read it again, tracing the ink with my thumb, waiting for my brain to correct itself. It does not. The time is wrong too, minutes that have not happened yet, a day I have not lived. I laugh short and brittle and say out loud that this is stupid. I have seen misprinted receipts before. Someone loaded the wrong roll, someone forgot to reset something. There is always a reason. I fold the paper and shove it into the console, deciding to deal with it when I reach the depot. The road stretches ahead, familiar curves and markers, and for a few minutes I start to believe myself. Then the gauge drops another notch. I slow down, easing my foot, calculating distances in my head. I know how far I should be able to go, even with a bad reading. I know this stretch well enough to drive it with my eyes closed. The math does not work. The needle is moving too fast. I crack the window, listening for any sign of trouble, but the engine hums steady. The trailer tracks true. There is no smell of fuel, no vibration, nothing to justify what I am seeing. I reach the point where I would normally see the turnoff for the old quarry road, and it is gone, not hidden. Gone. The land looks right, the slope and the scrub, but the sign is missing, the gravel mouth swallowed by dirt like it was never there. I feel a flicker of unease, then irritation. Signs get taken down. Roads close. It happens. Still, my grip tightens. I decided to turn back. That thought lands heavy and final. I signal slow and swing the rig around at the next wide patch, heart thudding harder than it should. As I straighten out, the fuel light flares bright, and the gauge drops again, almost mocking me. I swear and hit the dash, then freeze when the radio crackles. At first it is just static, then a voice slides through, thin and distorted. It says my name. I jerk upright, scanning the mirrors, the road, the empty dark. No one should know my name out here. I have not used the radio since leaving town. I tell myself it is bleed, through some other channel, coincidence. The voice speaks again, clearer this time, telling me I missed the turn. I slam the radio off, and the cab drops into a thick silence that presses against my ears. I drive faster than I should, every sense sharpened, watching the gauge like it might lunge. When the station lights appear ahead again, my stomach sinks. It is the same station, same pumps, same building, same wrongness. I know it is impossible. I have not turned again. The road has not bent back. Yet there it is, waiting exactly where it was before. I do not stop. I drive straight past, eyes locked forward, jaw clenched, until it aches. The lights slide by, and for a moment I think I have beaten it. Then the engine sputters, just once. Enough to send a jolt of panic through me. The gauge needle kisses empty. I coast onto the shoulder, breathing hard, cursing myself, the station, everything. I sit there, hands shaking, watching the road. The silence stretches. No cars pass. No wind, just me and the ticking of cooling metal. I tell myself I will wait, that someone will come. Minutes drag. The radio crackles again. Even though it is off, it tells me to come back. I argue with the empty cab. I say no. I say this is wrong. I say I am not doing it. The engine dies with a final shudder, leaving me with a choice that does not feel like one. I grab the receipt from the console, unfold it, and read the date again. My hands are steady now, a strange calm settling over me. I understand something then, not fully, but enough. I walk back to the station. Up close, it feels thinner, like a picture propped up instead of a building. The door opens before I touch it. Inside, the air hums. The clerk stands behind the counter, smiling without warmth. He does not ask me anything. He reaches under the counter and pulls out a ledger, flipping to a page already marked. My name is there. The truck number. The load, a space for a signature. I tell him this is not happening. He nods, like he has heard it before. He says the fuel has to come from somewhere. He says roads need travelers. He taps the receipt date and tells me that is when I finish paying. He slides a pen toward me. I think about the weight behind my truck, about the men waiting at the depot, about the life I have driven in circles. I think about the gauge draining, about the roads disappearing. I sign. When I step back outside, the truck is idling full. The gauge reads right. The road ahead is clear. I drive. The drive back feels normal, blessedly so. The quarry road is where it should be. The lights of Kalgoorlie rise ahead. I do not look back. At the depot, they wave me in, unload the trailer, clap me on the shoulder. No one mentions anything strange. I do not either. Years later, when the date on that receipt finally arrives, I wake up with the sound of ticking in my ears. I know then what I gave up to keep driving and why I will never stop. I was already annoyed when the pump clicked off because I had misjudged the distance again, and my car rolled in on fumes. I remember squeezing the handle one more time, watching the numbers freeze, and muttering to myself because the screen flickered like it was about to reset. I just wanted to pay, grab a coffee, and get back on the road before my nerves caught up with me. I was moving my entire life in the back of that car, and every extra stop felt like a reminder that I was doing this alone. Inside, the station was quiet enough that my footsteps sounded intrusive. I set my keys on the counter and asked for the total. The woman behind the register didn't look up right away. When she did, she scanned me like she was trying to place my face, then named the amount. I paid in cash, mostly out of habit, and she slid the receipt toward me without a word. I glanced at it, folded it once, and shoved it into my jacket pocket without thinking. I had just pushed the door open when something made me stop. It wasn't a sound or a smell. It was the feeling that I had forgotten something important, like leaving the house without locking the door. I pulled the receipt back out, planning to check the total, and that was when I noticed the date. It was dated tomorrow. At first, I honestly thought I was tired enough to be misreading it. I rubbed my thumb across the ink, checked the month, checked the year. Everything else was correct. Same town, same station name, same register number. Only the date was wrong, printed one full day ahead. I turned back to the counter and asked the woman if her machine was off. She didn't even look confused. She just shrugged and said the printer did that sometimes. Then she smiled, but it wasn't reassuring. It was the kind of smile people give when they want you to stop asking questions. I laughed it off, because it was easier than standing there feeling stupid, folded the receipt again, and walked back to my car. I didn't notice the first thing on the receipt until I was 10 minutes down the road. I stopped at a red light, pulled the receipt out again, and finally read past the total. Below the itemized fuel charge, there were other lines. Coffee, which I hadn't bought. Bandage pack. Phone call. None of it made sense. I told myself it was a glitch, some kind of overlap from another transaction. But my chest felt tight as I folded it up again. The light turned green, and I kept driving. I stopped for coffee anyway, because my hands were shaking and I needed something warm to steady myself. The moment I set the cup on my dashboard, my stomach dropped. The receipt line for coffee matched the exact price printed on the lid. Even the size was the same. I sat there staring at it, my fingers numb around the steering wheel, telling myself that prices were standardized and coincidences happened. Then my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it out of reflex. It was my sister, calling to ask if I had left a box of old photos at her place. I told her no, asked why, and she said she'd found one in her hallway labeled with my handwriting. We talked for less than a minute. When I hung up, my hand went straight to the receipt again. Phone call. I pulled over so hard I didn't even signal. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I read the receipt line by line, slowly this time. Coffee, phone call, bandage pack, argument, delay, injury. Each word sat there like it was waiting for me. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I was stressed, overtired, and reading meaning into nonsense. I shoved the receipt into the glove compartment and forced myself to get back on the road. For a while, it worked. The road stretched out, my breathing evened, and the sense of panic dulled into something manageable. Then a car cut me off without warning. I slammed the brakes and felt the seatbelt bite into my shoulder. I rolled down my window and yelled something I can't even remember now, and the driver screamed back. We exchanged a few angry words through open windows, sharp and pointless, before he sped off. I sat there shaking, more angry at myself than at him. Argument. My hands were trembling as I opened the glove compartment again. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't not look. The receipt was still folded the same way. The next line after argument was delay. Under it was a time estimate written in minutes. I checked the clock on my dashboard. The numbers matched the delay I had already accumulated from pulling over, stopping for coffee, and calming down. That was when the fear stopped being abstract. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was the cold certainty that something was very wrong and very specific. I drove slower after that, hyper-aware of everything around me. Every sound from the engine made me flinch. Every passing car felt like a threat. When my phone buzzed with a low battery warning, I nearly threw it onto the passenger seat just to make it stop. I kept thinking about the word injury, sitting there on that receipt like a promise. The delay ended exactly when the receipt said it would. I know because I was watching the clock when it happened. The road narrowed unexpectedly, and I swerved too late to avoid a piece of debris. The impact was loud and sharp. The car jerked, and pain exploded through my palm as it slammed into the wheel. I pulled over immediately, breathing hard, staring at my hand as blood welled up between my fingers. It wasn't a serious injury, not really. Just a deep cut, but it hurt enough to make my eyes water. I remembered the bandage pack on the receipt and felt sick. I wrapped my hand in a napkin, dug through my bag for supplies, and found a small pack of bandages I didn't remember packing. I didn't cry until I was back in the driver's seat. I cried because I felt stupid and scared and completely out of control. I cried because the receipt wasn't done yet. There was one line left. After injury, there was a final item. Return. I stared at that word until my vision blurred. Return to what? The station. The road. Some version of myself I was already losing. I sat there for a long time, gripping the wheel with my uninjured hand, trying to think of a way out of it. I considered throwing the receipt away, burning it, tearing it into pieces, but some part of me knew it wouldn't matter. I didn't want to go back. Everything in me screamed that returning was a mistake, but the longer I sat there, the worse my head felt. The pain in my hand pulsed in time with my heartbeat. My phone lost signal. The road ahead felt wrong in a way I can't fully explain, like it was flattening, losing depth, becoming something artificial. So I turned around. The station looked exactly the same when I pulled back in, but it felt different. Smaller. Closer. Like it had been waiting. I parked at the same pump without thinking, turned off the engine, and sat there until the silence pressed in around me. When I stepped inside, the woman behind the counter looked up and nodded, like she'd expected me. I put the receipt on the counter between us. My hand was shaking so badly the paper rattled. I asked her why it had tomorrow's date. I asked her why everything on it had happened. I asked her what return meant. She didn't answer right away. She took the receipt, looked at it, and sighed. Then she told me that sometimes the printer ran ahead, that sometimes people got a preview of what they were already on their way toward. She said it like it was normal, like she was explaining a loyalty program. I asked her if I could change it. She shook her head and slid the receipt back to me. She said returning was the only way to close it. She said if I didn't, it would keep printing. I don't remember leaving after that. I remember sitting in my car, staring at the receipt one last time and feeling something loosen in my chest. I folded it carefully, like it was fragile, and set it on the passenger seat. Then I did the only thing I could think of. I tore it in half. Nothing dramatic happened. No alarms, no lights, no sudden pain. Just silence. I waited, counting my breaths, expecting something to go wrong. When it didn't, I started the car and drove away slowly, carefully, like the road might shatter if I rushed it. I never went back to that station. I finished the drive, arrived where I was going, and unpacked my life from the back seat one box at a time. The cut on my hand healed into a thin scar. My sister never found another box of photos. And I learned something I don't talk about much. Some warnings aren't meant to scare you. They're meant to show you the shape of the path you're already on, so you can decide whether to keep walking it. I was already tired and irritated when I pulled off the highway because the fuel light had been glowing longer than I liked, and my phone signal had dropped to nothing about 10 minutes earlier. I remember muttering to myself while easing the truck onto the gravel shoulder, calculating whether I could make the next town, then deciding I did not want to gamble with a delivery that mattered to my job. When the station appeared ahead, I felt relieved first, then confused, because it looked wrong the closer I got, like it had been shut down years ago, but someone forgot to tell the pumps. I rolled to a stop beside the nearest pump and killed the engine. The place was dark, not just closed dark, but abandoned dark, with the kind of stillness that presses against your ears. The doors were shut tight, metal shutters pulled down over the windows, a chain looped through the handles. I sat there for a few seconds, drumming my fingers on the steering wheel, telling myself I would leave and risk it. Then I noticed the pump display glowing faintly, waiting as if it had been expecting me. I stepped out and the air felt heavier than it had on the road. Not hot or cold, just thick. I reached for the nozzle mostly out of habit, thinking nothing would happen. The moment I lifted it, the pump whirred to life. The numbers started ticking up smoothly, steadily, the sound unmistakable. I froze, nozzle in my hand, staring at the hose as if it might pull itself free and wrap around my arm. Fuel was flowing. I could feel the vibration through the metal. I laughed once, short and sharp, because it felt safer than thinking too hard about it. Maybe it was some automated setup. Maybe the station was still operating remotely. I shoved the nozzle into the tank and let it run, keeping my eyes on the display. Everything about it looked normal, and that almost made it worse. I kept glancing toward the building, expecting someone to step out and yell at me, but nothing moved. When the tank was full, the pump clicked off like it should. I replaced the nozzle carefully, half expecting it to keep running without me. It stayed silent. For a moment, I felt foolish for being scared at all. I told myself to get back in the truck and leave. Instead, I stood there, staring at the locked doors, wondering how I was supposed to pay. That was when I heard the sound behind me. It was soft at first, a metallic clink that made me think of keys. I turned slowly and saw the chain on the door sliding free on its own, links sagging as if invisible hands were unhooking them. The shutters rattled upward, stopping halfway. The door creaked open just enough to reveal darkness inside. I backed away without thinking, my heel catching on the curb. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I remember saying out loud that I did not need anything else, that I was leaving. The door stayed open, patient, waiting. I had the strange, overwhelming sense that if I drove away without going inside, something worse would follow me. That thought did not feel like imagination. It felt planted, deliberate. I argued with it in my head, but my feet were already moving. Each step toward the door felt heavier than the last. When I crossed the threshold, the air inside smelled old and dry, like dust that had not been disturbed in years. The lights flickered on one by one, not all at once, but in a slow line that led toward the counter. Shelves stood half empty, products arranged neatly despite the grime. A clock above the register ticked loudly, too loudly, marking each second like it mattered. I called out a greeting, my voice sounding small in the space. No one answered. I approached the counter and saw the register screen glowing, waiting. The total was already there, the exact amount I would expect for the fuel I took. My hands were shaking as I reached into my pocket. When I looked up, there was a man standing on the other side of the counter. He had not walked in. I would have heard it. He was just there, looking at me with a tired expression that felt painfully familiar. He asked if that was all, his voice flat, professional. I nodded, unable to speak. I paid, took the receipt he handed me, and noticed his hands were stained dark, like old oil that never quite washes off. As I turned to leave, he told me to drive carefully. He said it the way someone does when they know more than you do. The door swung shut behind me the moment I stepped outside, locking with a solid finality that made me flinch. The lights inside went out all at once. I got back in the truck and sat there, breathing hard, staring at the receipt. The date printed on it was correct. The time was exact. There was nothing strange about it at all. I started the engine and pulled back onto the road, telling myself I would report the station later, tell someone it was operating illegally. With each mile, the tension in my shoulders eased a little. That relief did not last. About 10 minutes later, the fuel gauge dropped suddenly, plunging toward empty as if something had opened a drain beneath the tank. I cursed and slowed, heart racing again. Then the gauge climbed back up, settling exactly where it had been before I stopped. It felt like a warning or a reminder. The rest of the drive passed without incident, but I could not shake the feeling of being watched. Every reflection in the mirror made me tense. When I reached my destination and shut off the engine, The silence felt too similar to the silence at that station. I did my delivery and headed home, exhausted, replaying the night over and over. Days passed, then weeks. I told myself I would forget it, that it was just a strange coincidence, a poorly maintained station, and an overactive imagination. I never saw that place again, even when I drove the same route on purpose, searching. Months later, I stopped at a different station and paid at the counter. As the clerk handed me my receipt, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. His hands were stained dark with old oil, the same way. I asked him how long he had worked there. He told me he had just started, taking over after the previous owner disappeared. I did not ask any more questions. I paid and left, and I have never stopped for gas at a closed station since, no matter how empty my tank gets. I learned that night that some places are not meant to be found, and if they open their doors for you, it is because they expect something in return.